Here's the real reason leadership feels so heavy in schools and what's on the other side of the weight. I'm recording this while attending the National Conference on Education sponsored by AASA, the School Superintendents Association. And I've been asking district leaders one simple question. What's the biggest challenge you're facing right now at the district level? Overwhelmingly, the answers have been developing a strong principal pipeline, growing leadership capacity, and retaining the leaders we invest in. And I keep hearing the same frustration. We develop them, we spend money on them, we pour into them, and then they leave. Now, I want to offer something that may feel disruptive, but I say it with deep respect for the work you're doing. You don't have a pipeline problem. You're caught in a do more trap. And the system your leaders are stepping into is heavier than it should be. Now, let me be clear. Leadership is supposed to carry weight. It is some of the most meaningful, purpose-driven, impactful work you will ever do. And it's also some of the most demanding. That tension is real. But there's a difference between meaningful weight and structural overload. And many districts right now are confusing the two. My name is Dr. Katina Fuller-Scott. Most people call me Dr. K, and I serve as a CEO and strategic leadership partner for Be What Matters. We are a trusted education and management consulting company for impact-driven leaders and organizations. Leaders and organizations come to us when they feel like they've done all the right things and leadership still feels heavier than it should and they're not making the impact they desire. Other times, they're doing well and they want to protect the success before unnecessary strain shows up. For over 20 years, I've served in K-12 education as a teacher, assistant principal, and program administration. I also bring operational experience across nonprofit and corporate communities, which allows me to see leadership through strategic, instructional, and operational lenses, not in isolation, but as an integrated system that must work under pressure. And here's what I've learned across districts. When results stall, when morale dips, when turnover increases, our instinct is to add something. Another initiative, another framework, another training, another compliance structure, another meeting. That instinct feels responsible. It feels proactive. It feels like leadership. But it is often the beginning of the do more trap. Here's how the trap works. When the leadership system is misaligned, adding more effort does not produce clarity. It produces weight. You create a leadership academy, you strengthen mentorship, you introduce coaching cycles, you increase accountability, all good things. But if you do not examine how leadership actually flows inside your district, you simply layer new expectations onto an already overloaded structure. Now, principals are not just leading schools, they're leading schools while implementing multiple initiatives, responding to compliance pressures, managing operational complexity, carrying instructional expectations, navigating community demands, and absorbing emotional strain. We are developing leaders, but we are developing them inside systems that quietly exhaust them. That's why leadership feels heavier than it should. When I talk to superintendents, I don't hear a lack of care. I hear commitment, I hear vision, I hear investment, but I also hear fatigue. Because what often goes unexamined is this. Are we strengthening people or are we redesigning the system those people have to function within? Under pressure, leadership begins to concentrate. Decisions bottleneck, information bottlenecks. Culture stabilizes under personalities instead of structures. And strong principles compensate. They stay later, they smooth conflict, they hold vision, they absorb stress, they become the glue. But when a person becomes the glue, the system never strengthens. And over time, even the most committed leader begins to ask, is this sustainable? Turnover in many cases is not about dissatisfaction. It is about depletion. Many districts have directors of leadership, internal development teams, and coaches. That matters. But internal teams often operate within the existing structure. What rarely gets examined is whether the structure itself needs redesigning. Because when you are inside the system, you normalize its weight. You adapt, you compensate, you push through. You rarely step back and ask, is this how leadership should function? Training builds capacity. System redesign builds sustainability. If we overinvest in one and underexamine the other, leadership will continue to feel heavier than it should. There's another layer. The principal role today requires both deep instructional leadership and strong operational management. Many leaders are strong in one area. Few are structurally supported in mastering both seamlessly. Instruction without operational alignment creates chaos. Operations without instructional clarity creates stagnation. And when both are expected without structural clarity, the leader carries the integration alone. Again, not a motivation problem, a design problem. Leadership will always carry weight. It should. It is both some of the most enjoyable and most demanding work you will ever do. So, what's on the other side of that weight? The joy comes from impact, from growth, from watching students thrive, from seeing adults rise, from building something that matters. The demand comes from responsibility, from complexity, from human dynamics, from public accountability. That weight is meaningful. But structural overload is different. On the other side of unnecessary weight is clarity. Leadership that flows instead of bottlenecks, decision making that is distributed instead of centralized, ownership that lives where the work lives, emotional intelligence practiced system wide, not carried by a single individual or a faithful few. On the other side of alignment is alignment between vision and execution. On the other side is a superintendent who is not the final container for every unresolved tension. On the other side is sustainability, not because the work is easier, but because it is properly supported. At Be What Matters, we don't just consult, we partner in transformation. We approach leadership development through systems thinking, emotional intelligence, and immersive learning. We work at both the district and school levels simultaneously. We examine how leadership flows, where it accumulates, where it bottlenecks, and where identity and structure are misaligned. Because when the system is aligned, something shifts. Leaders can breathe, teams can move, turnover decreases, not because you demanded more resilience, but because you removed unnecessary strain. Impact scales, not because you added another initiative, but because you clarified what was already there and you were more intentional in the work you've already done. If you're investing in leadership, development, and still feeling the weight, we want to invite you into a strategic conversation, a free consultation, not to add something else, but to examine where you may be caught in the do more trap and where structural weight might be accumulating in your district. We'll look at your leadership flow, your principal pipeline, and whether partnership would meaningfully shift the system. If it does, we'll talk next steps. If it doesn't, you'll still walk away with clarity because strong leaders should not have to become the system in order to sustain it. Let's design leadership so it can carry meaningful weight without carrying what was never meant to be held alone.